Hi folks, it's Evo here from Thundermist Lure Company. Great to see you and welcome to today's episode of Thundermist Fishing Tips. I get asked quite a lot, how do you avoid snags? What I like to do today is share 3 simple but yet important tips on what you can do day in and day out to avoid getting snagged up and of course losing tackle. So the very first thing, you may have heard me mention before, when you cast your line out, let it sink to the bottom. Point number 1, you have to find the bottom. You have to know where the bottom is in order to avoid it. So you cast it out, let it sink down, and just count how many seconds. And let's just say it's 10 seconds and then boom, you felt the bottom. Okay, then reel it in. Now you know 10 seconds is where the bottom's at. So you want to cast and let it fall 8 seconds or 9 seconds. You want it to be close to the bottom, but not on the bottom. So point number 1, find the bottom. Point number 2, very, very important point number 2. When you cast your line out, if you've got some slack in the line, a lot of times the wind will take it and you'll get a bow in your line. What you've done now is you've lost direct contact with your lure. So it's very, very important. After you cast it out, make sure your lure falls on a tight line. You want your line to be tight. And the reason is, with a tight line, you let your lure fall 8-9 seconds. Once you start reeling, your lure is starting to reel in right away because it's direct. There's no slack. You're direct to your lure. You're starting to reel. Your lure's moving right away. If you have slack in your line, the wind's picked it up, or you've seen me fish a lot in the whirlpool with the currents. If the current's taking your line and you've got a bow in your line, now when you start reeling in, you're not reeling in the lure. So you let your lure go down 8-9 seconds, you start reeling in, thinking you're reeling in, but you're not, because all you're doing is taking up that slack that's in the line, and while you're doing that, your lure's still falling. Then all of a sudden you end up getting snagged. So very, very important. You do the countdown, but you do the countdown on a tight line so that you know the minute you start reeling, you've got your lure moving at the same time. Point number 3. Rod position. Very, very important is the position of your rod while you're reeling in your lure. So the key is keep your lure out of the snags, but keep it down close to the bottom in the strike zone. So the way you do that, rod positioning. Rod tip pointed down. As it's pointing down, your lure is forcing down, so you're keeping it deep. You bring your rod tip up to about midway, about halfway. Now you're starting to bring your lure up a bit. You raise your rod tip up high. Now you're forcing your lure up even higher. So what I like to do is cast it out 1/3 of the way, rod tip down, 1/3 of the way about medium, and 1/3 of the way up high. That way the lure is working the bottom, then it starts to come up as you get closer to shore, and then up even higher when you get real close to shore, and you avoid those snags close by. So those are 3 very simple but effective ways to keep you out of snags and keep you fishing more often. If you're not getting snagged, you're not losing tackle, you're not retying, you're spending more time fishing, and at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. I want to thank you ever so much for tuning in to today's episode of Thundermist Fishing Tips. And as always, folks, until next time, good luck and good fishing.